The capacity to learn is a gift. The ability to learn is a skill. The willingness to learn is a choice. So, good morning and good evening to all the participants and panelists out there. We welcome you all to the day 2 of the webinar on business analytics, way forward education and industry. So, before beginning for the new learning from today's session, let me recall some interesting presentations from yesterday. So yesterday we had 3 sessions. First session was on evolution of business analytics, which was taken over by Dr. Purushottam Bang. In his talk, Mr. Bang explained that data and business analytics has been prevalent for businesses for ages. However, the way in which business analytics is being done has changed rapidly over the years with the advent of social media and consequent advent of big data. The 3 V's of big data, that is volume, velocity, and variety, has been challenging. But thanks to new technology, we have been able to manage. Business analytics is applicable in all management areas, and the effort is to drive business insights from data. Dr. Bang also highlighted the huge potential of business analytics and consequent demand for trained business analytics personnel. The next session was taken over by Dr. Ramesh Rajagopalan on business analytics landscape. In his talk, he reiterated the points highlighted by Dr. Bang that there is a huge gap in business analytics talent supply. He went on to explain that business analytics is a scientific process of transforming data into insights for better decision making. He went on to explain how analytics has evolved from descriptive to predictive, prescriptive, and cognitive. He explained the landscape for teaching business analytics at 3 levels, that is, foundation, application, and specialization in all business domains of sales, marketing, finance, operations, and HR. The last session was from Mr. Doug Gray on the topic Business Analytics Application in Industry. In his talk, he highlighted that it is difficult for technology and data to do well in industry and went on to explain the top 10 reasons why business analytics projects fail in industry. He went on to explain the importance of defining the problem properly and having a clear objective or KPI. There is a need to develop the skill sets for defining the problem. He then went on to explain the other reasons for failure in industry, like there is a reason of data issues, having the right data in right form, misapplying the model, need for proper experimental design, solving a problem that is not a business priority, communication, change management, unrealistic expectations, project management, excessive focus on the model, technique or technology. Model is a means to an end. Technology keeps changing, and balance between aiming for perfection and delivery. He also said getting from sandbox model to production system is a big challenge. He summed up his presentation by emphasizing the importance of empathy for people in the project execution. So these were the major learnings which we had from the yesterday's session. So now let's begin a new course of learning with today's first session. And before starting up the session, let me again give you the certain guidelines. If you guys have any specific question, you can post your question on Q&A section, which is being moderated by Dr. Santosh and Professor Gurudat Shenoy. For any further clarification or doubts, you can post your messages on chat box, which is being moderated by Professor Dilip and Professor Nagasubba Reddy. So without any further ado, let's start with the first session for the day. The first session for the day is on business analytics educational framework, and the resource person for the same is Dr. Ramesh Rajgopalan. Those who have Those who are new for today's session, let me give a brief intro about Dr. Ramesh. Dr. Ramesh is a globally recognized speaker and expert in the area of business analytics. He is a founding partner for Set Connect Company. He has a unique blend of academic and corporate leadership, and he has done very senior role in directing Master of Science in Business Analytics at UT Austin McCombs School of Business. So over to you, Dr. Ramesh. We are eager to learn some new learnings from you.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction.
Thank you, Ramesh, and look forward.
So, Miss Priya, I just go and share screen now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can
Yes.
go ahead with that, sir.
I'm sharing now.
Yes, sir.
Is it okay? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Again, good to have you all here. Uh, so, what I'm going to do today is to mainly focus on one aspect of what we discussed yesterday, and that is how do we bring all the discussion that we had yesterday into focus in terms of educational framework. So what I will be presenting to you, I'll be reiterating some of the points we made yesterday, and I will go in a lot more detail on the uh, the landscape of the educational needs and what is the framework, what's the appropriate framework to address some of the challenges that we face. And I will also throw some light on what has been happening, particularly in the universities in the United States. You know, what has been the trend and where it is heading as far as business analytics education is concerned. So that's kind of overall flow for today's presentation. So I'm going to reiterate some points. You know, global challenge. You know, we all are here assembled together. I think our common goal here is to understand what is business analytics, and more importantly, from an academic standpoint, as leaders of academic institutions, as faculty members of various departments within the academic institutions, our interest is to not only understand what business analytics is, but really what is the need? You know, how do I understand the challenge posed by the market needs, and how do I respond individually as well as an institution? So, in order to do that, first we need to know some of the challenges that exist. And one of the biggest challenges that we see today is the shortage. You know, there is not enough talent. We are not uh, creating students with that aptitude for analytics. And the market needs, the industry folks, including yesterday's speaker, Doug Gray, pointed out how important this business analytics is for organizations such as Walmart and pretty much every organization, small, big, medium size, it doesn't really matter, right? So the challenge is for us to produce or create talent with the analytic skills and ability to solve problems and meet the needs of the industry. And in order to do so, we have to do certain things. And I think today's presentation, that's what I'll focus on. And one of the big challenges that we face is, you know, as this study here, what I'm showing on the screen, in the United States, the Bureau of Labor of Statistics says the need for people with the analytics background or analytic skills is only going to keep increasing over the next several years. And we know that, but here there is a quantitative uh, confirmation to that fact. And this slide I showed yesterday, and I want to reiterate one major point from this slide, is that in all the programs that we have seen in all across the globe, in institutions across the globe, uh, hardly 5% of students take courses that are in business analytics. And it certainly is a huge gap. And the gap really means we have an opportunity. We here in this room or in this seminar, each one of us can make a difference here. And that is that's a great challenge to address and to respond to. So that's as an institution, that's an opportunity for us. We can create the pathways for students in business analytics. And I'm going to quote some of the folks, and some of these quotes are my own quotes that I've given at different instances. I'll let you read for a minute. So basically the first one points out that you can crunch numbers all you want, you can create models all you want, but if you're not able to tie all that work that you're doing to making business decisions, to help businesses make decisions and drive actions from those decisions, if you can do that, you can be a valuable, very valuable to the organization. So challenge one, how do we create a student with this kind of aptitude? A good data scientist must be able to recognize trends, identify and build the right models, and draw conclusions from the model output. Now here, the aptitude here, that the skill that we are focusing here is to be able to understand the business problem and identify the right model and build it. Right? So this is one of the key aspects of a business analytics professional, to be able to understand the problem and relate that to the right sets of models that we can bring to use. Ability to communicate effectively about analytics is the single most sought after capability among graduates in the analytics program. So, as academics, as faculty members, institutional heads, who are looking to build, develop programs, new courses in business analytics, our goal is very clear. We want to have students be able to communicate effectively about analytics. So, building, understanding, crunching numbers, building models, and so on, important, yes, but tie that to the business decisions, even more important. Recognize trends, identify and build the right models, draw conclusions, yes, and ability to communicate effectively. And if we can produce students with these kinds of qualities, I think we can make a difference in the marketplace, right? So that is what I would like for us to keep in mind as we, next few minutes, I will talk about a framework that that we all can use. We all can use this framework to build programs in analytics and deliver, degree or certificates and so on. But keep this in mind, that in all of that, whether it is a certificate program or a diploma program or a graduate master's program, the essence of all that has to be, the end outcome has to produce students with these kinds of aptitudes and skills. So yesterday we heard Doug say, begin with the end in mind, right? So again, let me connect that back to what we are discussing here today. What is the end in mind for all of us? I know for myself, I know I've spoken enough with Dr. Bung, and I'm sure if I have an opportunity to speak to every one of you, the end is fairly clear. That's why we're all here today, right? The end goal is to impart that education in business analytics. Now, it is not just imparting education, but the goal has to be even more sharper, and the objective is clear, and that objective has to be well defined. That end in mind is to create. If we don't have that, this is what we should strive for, to produce students with the aptitudes that we called out. And rest of the presentation, I'll kind of lay them out, right? So before I jump into it, I'll give you a glimpse of this end in mind with a case study. It's a case study from a real world. I've had the opportunity to work in the industry for almost 2 decades. And through that work, um, I have been fortunate to also work in the business analytics area. I've led the large teams and so on. And I'm going to kind of go through a example of one of those projects. It's a real project. It's a real work, produce results uh, for a large company. So I'm going to start with the first aspect of doing analytics. If you want to define an analytics project or work, the place you start is to define the business need. What exactly are we trying to solve? That's an important part of being an analytics professional, is to extract this. It could take one meeting, sitting down with your customer for 1 hour. It could take 1 week, sitting down with the customers, maybe not just an individual, but a team of individuals. It could take a month if it's a complex problem. But the key here is, if you remember the aptitudes we talked about, the communication and the interaction, and the ability to extract that information and define that as a business need, right? So after all the discussion we have had with, I was in the analytics team in a marketing environment, and with a team of modeling experts and project managers and so on. After many, many discussions, we came down to defining the need as this one sentence that basically takes us all the way through rest of the analytics that need to be done to support this, right? So it takes a lot of work to get to this point. And the business need is to identify the likelihood of a prospective customer buying my product. It can go even further down to specific product or product groups and so on. So this is what the experts in the field are talking about, is being able to extract and define a need for the business. Often famous quotation from some of my colleagues, particularly in my one of my companies I work, which is at Dell, is if I say, I'm here for a meeting, tell me what your problem is so I can go and figure out what the solution is. They just smile and kind of they kind of shoot back at me and saying, well, if I know what the problem is, why would I have you here? you are supposed to help me understand what the problem is. So the problem here is basically that business need. I want to know among all these millions of customer base, who is likely to make a purchase, right? That's the need. Now, the need needs to be translated to a question, right? So in analytics, this is where we begin to apply our analytics thought process and start relating this business need to what we need to do as business analytics professionals. We need to start putting some frames, some questions around the business need, and then identify some solutions that may address those questions and provide a solution, and so on. So the business question here is, who are the target customers with the highest propensity to purchase? Again, I simplify this, but it takes a lot of effort to come down to this, right? So the business analytics technique. So then I have a business need. I've raised some business questions. In this case, I simplified it, just ask one question, but it could be multiple questions addressing the business need. Then the business technique. What is my analytics technique? How do I answer this question to identify the target buyers who has the highest propensity? Well, then I have to start thinking about the probabilities. I have to think about the population, the sample size, and from that I need to figure out the probability of someone buying this particular product, and so on. So I need to start getting my analytics hat and start working on it. And the technique that I'm going to show here is a general category of one of the analytics modeling approach. Is called propensity model. And the propensity model is basically the way to measure the propensity to purchase, right? And in using that, I will determine, you can substitute some of those who are statistics experts here. You can substitute likelihood to probability, determine the probability of purchase, and score the customer based on that probability or likelihood of purchase, right? So again, some of the deep domain experts in statistics immediately start cranking up your thought process and say, hey, this is a classification problem. In analytics, we call this a classification problem, right? So then I know a series of techniques that I can put to use. And yesterday, I think Mr. Doug Gray was talking about experimental design. So all those kinds of things come into play. So then I need to know what is my data, what's the source, and how do I segment the data. In analytics, modeling is not just about taking the data, coming up with a classification model. In this particular case, let's say this is a logistic regression model is what I decide to use to come up with those probabilities. Then I need to know the data sets, and then I need to plan, design an experiment with the data. And that experimental design will say, here is my model data, here's my test data, here's my validation data. And so I systematically go, remember I explained or defined this as a scientific process. So this is why science is coming into picture here. So I put this into these groups of data sets. So I use one data set to build model, and then I'm going to use the test data set to validate or to test the model to see if it's consistent with my first building approach with the ways to measure these things. I don't want this to be a modeling class. And, and then the validation set is going to validate what I did by consistently showing the same kind of results. That gives me confidence that this model is going to work and provide the result that I'm looking for, right? So business question is identifying target buyers with the highest likelihood. Now I have a model, and the model will give me that likelihood. Now with the probability, I can say Mr. Bung has a higher potential to buy this product than Mr. Venkatesh, and Mr. Venkatesh has a higher propensity to purchase than Ms. Priya, and so on. I can then put them, score them based on this probability. I put them in scores, then I put them in deciles. In other words, top 10%. Let me take the top 10%. Now, Mr. Customer Relationship Manager, here is your top 10% for this campaign that you're going to run. And use this top 10% customer. Your likelihood of converting them into a buyer is very high.
Yeah.
That's what I'm recommending to you. Draw conclusions from the model, right? One of the things we heard. So then you measure these outcomes in basically, you have data sets after you run this campaign. 1 week later, 1 month later, 1 quarter later, you see which ones converted to actually becoming a purchasing customer, from a prospect to a buying customer. Then you tally it, and then you go to your company VP and say, hey, this is what we have done. We have enabled X million dollars of new revenue by going with this approach, right? So this is called driving business value to the organization. Let me pause there and stop and say, the previous slide we said begin with the end in mind, right? So this is the end goal, folks. If you can understand the skills that we need to teach these kids, the students. I have a habit of saying kids because I think my age difference is quite, it's quite
Yeah.
substantial these days. So these students need to have a aptitude and the skills to do every one of these things. They need to be able to understand the business needs. They need to be able to frame the questions. They need to be able to identify the right kind of models and techniques. And then, most importantly, measure what they did, outcomes, and tie that back into the business value and present that confidently to the upper management or whoever they're presenting it to, or their customers, right? This is sort of the end goal in mind in any program. And the program I directed, I drove this day in and day out. This is my commitment. This was my passion to make sure students understand this. And even if I have one student understand this fully, I have done my job, right? So that was my drive. So before I get to the next slide, I'm going to kind of take maybe 20 seconds. Have you think about looking at this slide here. What do you think are the skills? What comes to your mind as the skills required to do all of these? If you have a pen and pencil, paper, just jot it down for yourself and then see if we all can agree. So while you're thinking, Professor Bung, what do you think? What are some of the qualities that you think will require to do all of these things?
I think, like you said, right? Understanding the business needs is very, very important. That is where they need to spend a quality time with the business executives, try to know, what actually they are expecting from you as a business analytics professional. So that's number one. And number
Mm-hmm.
two, to achieve that, to meet that need, you should be knowing what kind of data, what kind of model, all right, what kind of technique, tool I should be using it. And then draft a good proposal to the business head, saying that this is what can try to meet your need, right?
Okay.
And that is when that idea gets sold, then you get to the nitty gritties of that project.
Okay.
And that is very
So
very important, right? And implementation,
absolutely.
that is what I'm saying, right?
Right. So I think a lot of what you said, talking to the executives and understanding their business needs and so on, it comes down to a lot of it is communication and interaction, right? So here I just put a word cloud here. I threw a few words in here that you will often have to, you have to remember as a curriculum to build it in business analytics. So business value, um, business, driving actions, cleanse what? Cleanse the data, right? So construct models, visualize the data, visualization, and then, data query. You have to be able to do those kinds of things. Modeling, storytelling, statistics, science, analytics, communication, right? So these are the ones that I actually got from actually the key slide that I want to show with that discussion is this one, but this is basically converted into a word cloud is what I got there. But here it is. I try to put a structure behind that. Business analytic skills. If I have to do what I showed you, the end in mind, the case study that I kind of described. By the way, in that case study, it was a real case study that I was in. We had multiple models, and the business value we derived over a period of 2 to 3 years have been phenomenal. It's so much so that it even got into a blog article written by the CEO of the company, very influential individual, and he actually said my analytics team had with their application of analytics have generated revenue to the tune of several $1 million, right? So that's the sort of a nice end to that story. That's the end goal. So communicate with sponsors. In this case, I'm kind of bringing it back down to our college level, institutional level, university level, program level discussion here, right? This is not industry discussion. Sponsors meaning the people, the companies that are going to sponsor projects for us as part of the program. So communicate with the sponsors, interview business managers, identify source data, and so on and so forth, right? You can read it yourself. Highlighted some of these things, which is very much in line with what Doug Gray was saying yesterday, right? So it said oftentimes it is not the model, it's not the statistics, it's not the those kinds of things that is important. What's more important is how you are able to relate all of that to solve business problem, recommend actions, and stitch a story together, and connect that story with the business value, right? All of these have a common thread called communication run through it. And so if you are thinking of business analytics course, it is not a single course. If you're thinking of a business analytics certificate, it's not just a single aspect of modeling or teaching Python or something like that. It has to be comprehensive to cover all these things. Note that modeling and Python is not left behind here. When you look at query data, clean, aggregate, and prepare data, right? Today's environment is large data sets, big data environment. So if you want to aggregate, prepare the data for model readiness, you have to spend a lot of time with tools like Python. Most of you said SPSS. I'm sure if you have used SPSS for modeling, prior to actually building the model, I'm sure you have painfully gone through efforts to clean the data so it can be fed into the model, right? So let me get to the main part of this.
Ramesh
Um,
sir, can I stop you for a minute here just to
yeah,
get
sure.
a broader understanding? Because I believe, I don't know whether I am right or wrong, that having a deeper, broader understanding about the business is very, very important for a business analyst than a data analyst. Okay. So how do you take this, right? Or data scientist, for example. So
Okay,
that is
so
where the domain knowledge of a particular business becomes very, very important. Of course,
right.
statistics is required, modeling is required, everything else is required. But having that ability to understand the nuances of a business, how they are connected, and how it is being run is very, very important. So you can talk a little bit about that.
Right. So the question is, we have different roles: business analysts, data scientists, data engineers, and so on. Is the understanding of the business need important for all of them? The answer is yes. You can choose. Like every one of us have a choice. We can choose to focus on, say, data engineering aspect, where you're primarily dealing with the cleanse, uh, prepare, and manage data, and then you become limited, right? So if you don't know how that connects to the next stage of abstracting and building a model, and that how that model connects to or relates to the business problem, how
Yeah.
that business problem solving that drives business value, and why would that be important? And how can you explain what's in it for you, Mr. CEO, with those
Yeah.
results? You are going to your career may be somewhat limited, right? So in order for you to make the progress, always have to have an understanding of all the aspects of why we are doing this, how they're all related, right?
True.
And this framework, thanks for the question, because this framework that I'm going to show essentially has a academic curriculum that connects all these pieces together,
True.
that really brings all these things together, um, and without really compromising on any of these aspects. So if you take a student, walk them through this framework or this curriculum, and out comes the student with the enlightenment, and that enlightenment basically makes them ready for facing the world, where they can understand the need, define the questions, model, solve the problem, and so on, right? So this is sort of yesterday I went through it very quickly, but today I'm going to focus a little bit more on this. So the foundation, application, specialization, this is different shades of teaching analytics. Each one has a certain focus. Technology, that is embedded with the foundational aspects of teaching analytics. And then the communication and the quantitative storytelling, which is my favorite. And so I'll walk you through each one. Foundation. Um, so if you're a business analytics professional, right, the foundation really comes from quantitative and statistical skills. And students, we have to make them proficient through this foundational modules, proficient at general statistical analysis, right? Um, Up to maybe a certain level, maybe using some type of classification modeling techniques, like say a logistic regression model, where they can they can predict the outcomes of a binary variable. 0 or 1, buyer or non-buyer, patient or not patient. We have to be able to classify them into that using the data, right? That is at the foundational level. And be able to analyze categorical variables. Again, categorical means all data is not zeros and ones. We all know that, right? Some variables are, what's your gender, male and female, and maybe more. But that's the classification. That's called categorical variable. And we have to be able to know how to bring that into model, right? And because some of those factors could potentially impact the variable that you are measuring. So dependent variable, right? It may have influence the variable, influence who is going to buy or not. It could be a male or a female, or a person with a low, medium, high income, right? So those factors, we should be able, that's at the foundation level. And familiarity with experimental design. As you know, experimental design means creating that procedures to test a hypothesis, right? A scientific process that we define. And then some basics of optimization. Technology. Now, analytics, we all know that, we live in a world of technology. So when teaching analytics, obviously there's no compromise there. The technology comes here in the form of how to use software to build statistical models, to do visual analytics, to even present the dashboards and so on, and do what if kinds of analysis and so on. Historically, what we have used are proprietary packages, and that was evident in your survey yesterday. People had mentioned a few known kind of proprietary software off the shelf. But what has increasingly become common today, I think I addressed it to each one of you, is the open source based technology, right?
Yeah.
The proprietary technology, while it may still be in use, I think it is getting less and less uh, adopted because the open source technologies like Python, like R, especially when it comes to business analytics, and a few others that is popping up these days, they are so robust and easy to use. That is getting very common acceptance in all the academic programs across the board. Um, in technology, I think we also need to emphasize the need for knowing some basic SQL kind of things. People can very quickly query data and get what they want. And definitely reliance on Python. I think as we see more and more unstructured kind of data, right? So the text data, image data. Yesterday, Professor Bunk showed the video where it's all, mostly it's all analyzing the unstructured data. It's images, it's voice, text, and so on. With all that, you are making a decision. But behind the scene, there's some analytic algorithm that's running, taking all those things and identifying what's the extent of damage, and what's it worth, and who are the people who are capable of fixing that. If you noticed, it was an expensive car, so there are only certain body shops who will fix it. So they need to know all those things. And then they also need to know the location and send the Uber driver right to the location and so on. All these decisions are made, and that's all analytics modeling in the background that's happening. Now, to prepare unstructured data like that, to throw it into a model, and the model comes back and say, here's your body shops, here are the Uber driver located at this street and this corner, send that's the closest one. All those kinds of things is happening there, right? So that's the foundation in technology that we should be able to teach. Basics of statistics, basics of optimization, and some basic programming with Python and open source kind of things. We can expect them to have some SQL type experience. Otherwise, we can embed that in these two modules. Next, application. Here is our opportunity. I think some of us who are deeper in statistical modeling and so on, opportunity to provide a much deeper coverage of material in this in various different modeling techniques, specific to applying the modeling techniques to different business problems, right? And this is where I think you have heard of supervised learning, unsupervised learning, machine learning kind of methods. Supervised, the classification model that I already mentioned, clustering techniques, very commonly used. Some of you are common users of Netflix and Amazon. You probably know what I'm talking about when I say affinity analysis. This is, if you bought this book, you may also like this. If you bought this product, you may also like this. So how do you come up with those kinds of recommendations? It's called recommendation engine based on collaborative filtering. So it starts with affinity analysis. How much do Venkatesh like Professor Bung? There you can draw a vector and quantify the strength of that vector, and based on that you can come up with a network that says X is closer to Y than X to Z and things like that. So those kinds of techniques are applying to business problems. And then optimization techniques. Yesterday Professor Bunk talked about prescriptive analytics. Prescriptive analytics means you are specifying a single set of action, an optimized decision, right? So that optimization techniques, we have had them for years, 3-4 decades. Linear programming,
Yep.
Markovian models, stochastic methods to solve problems with variability and variance in the system and so on, right? So that is the application side. And then the specialization, obviously, here I'm referring to specialization with the business domain, and our departments and our schools. The business schools are fairly well structured in that sense. We have finance, we have marketing, we have HR. So that business domain knowledge, so we have in a business analytics program, you have to bring the best of all of these things to provide that specialization to the student, right? So the business domain with a focus on applying analytics to their specific problems. Lift analysis in marketing, for example, right? Stochastic volatility analysis in a financial market, network design in a supply chain, right? So these kind of problems are domain specific, but they all have application in the with the analytics and analytics techniques. And I want to, the last, but this is my most favorite, is the the aspect of business communication and quantitative storytelling. The program that I was directing, I tell my business partners that we are producing quantitative storytellers. So I call my students as quantitative storytellers. Now, what does that mean? Well, quantitative storytellers are the ones who are able to, as we said, all those aspects, understand the business problem, understand the impact of analytics to drive business value, ability to communicate the results of their work, and how those results drive action. So, the folks that they are recommending these solutions will take some action and hand that solution over and say, here, you can use it. This is what I coined a term called consumption-ready analytics. If you just build models and explain to someone, hey, I built a model, but the manager says, okay, what does it do for me? I don't know. Remember yesterday, Doug said, sandbox to production. So we need to understand, how do I hand something over that's production ready, right? So that's the aspect of all of these. Um, and in how do we do this in a university setting? I'm sure many of you are wondering. He's saying all this, but how do I do it in a classroom, right? And that's what we do that with real world analytics challenge, which has to be embedded into the curriculum. And this is what, some of you may have used the term capstone. I hesitate to use capstone. Yesterday's question and answer session, I think we did talk about capstone projects as a way to bridge or build that bridge between academic and the industry partnerships. Yes, I agree if it is used that way. But I think a lot of times the capstone word is used too loosely. So I'm calling it real world analytics challenge. It's a challenge for both me as a faculty, challenge for the sponsor, and more importantly, it's a challenge for the student to go solve a real world business problem as part of a program, right? That's part of this framework that we have to keep in mind. So all of these things together, I call it a fast track model, right? Foundation, application, specialization, embedded with technology, with real world analytics challenge. So fast track model. If you walk away from today's seminar and say, I know something about analytics curriculum, it has to do something with fast track. You can go back and remember, what does that fast track mean? Foundations based on statistics and optimization techniques, technology based on software, particularly Python, open source, specialized application, which is the higher level of modeling, as in supervised, unsupervised learning, optimization techniques like linear programming and so on. Specialization, all the business domains like marketing, finance, HR, healthcare, sports analytics, and so on, with real world analytics challenge. This is a project that I make them go through for a certain duration. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail, how to build that relationship, how to set that analytics challenge, right? So fast track, keep that in mind. So here you go. So what is this analytics challenge that I'm talking about here? It is a industry sponsored project. It provides the students with that experience. They can experience all phases of an advanced analytics project. We don't want this project to be something that said, well, I looked at the data, I put a dashboard together, and I think this is what the trend looks like. It has to be a real problem. Advanced analytics. It has to be based on classification methods or clustering methods or affinity models, linear programming, Markovian models, and so on. Something that meaningfully solves a business problem. And it is a vehicle, the analytics challenge is a vehicle for students to challenge themselves by immersing themselves into the real world experience. And the key aspect of this is the commitment from the academic side and the commitment from the business side. The students are always willing, and if you kind of throw them into this, I think they will take the challenge. It is the commitment from we as professors, program heads and so on, and the business sponsors. We have to come together and make a commitment to say, I think I'm going to make this student fully immersed into this aspect of solving a business problem with analytics. And this might be, I'm summarizing some of my experience. You know, what has worked best is when I put the students in groups of 3, 4, maybe 5. Uh, and they essentially, I just throw them out. Once I help define the project, I just throw them out, say, now you are hired as consultants for this company and go work there. I'm not going to be involved. I won't be sitting in your weekly meetings. You have to set up weekly meetings and you have to manage that. You have to manage the expectations. You have to define the problem. You have to produce the solution as a team, and you need to make that executive presentation. I will be there every step of the way with making sure there are some academic milestones. I'm going to measure you. I'm going to make you present, and I'm going to grade you on these things. But you manage the relationship with your sponsor, right? And using techniques you have learned from class, tools and techniques that we have learned. And the sponsors, I make them commit to become a client, mentor, and also provide the domain expertise to the students, right? So this has worked very well. Actually, the program I directed, we were at number 6 globally. I think over a period of 3 or 4 years that I've been there, we moved up to number 2, and oftentimes the surveys, the ranking surveys, quoted this business, this analytics challenge or capstone project as one of the key elements of the ranking, why it scored high, right? So if we do it well, I think we all can make a difference. We can make programs that sets itself apart from all the others. And we need to have, obviously it requires someone dedicated. If you are building a program or whatever it is that you're doing, there has got to be a champion within the university setting, institutional setting, who basically help define, manage, and facilitate all these things, scope of the project. If I'm putting 3 or 4 students together as consultants to do a project in, say, 1 semester, that roughly comes to about 500, 600 man hours, right? So the project has to be scoped correctly. You have to set the project timeline very clearly, define all that. The students team, you put them together, right mix of students, allocating this right amount of time, 500 man hours and whatnot. Time commitment, we have to be very specific to the business sponsor, saying you have to commit some time. It's just not that you define the project and you walk away. You have to stay committed, right? And that's why it is a relationship building process too for the for the institutions. This is an opportunity to build a relationship. It's a bridge. That's why Doug Gray yesterday said, how about capstone as a relationship builder? And this is how you build it. Okay, so given all that, I think I'm up on my time. So I'm going to wrap up with a couple of different observations. One is this case study. Remember I started with my industry case study with the caveat, keep end in mind, always begin with the end in mind. Now here, this is actually a real world problem solved by students in a capstone project or real world challenge project. So they define the business need by spending enormous amount of time sitting down with their business sponsors. We did have the business sponsor commit their time to sit down with them. In fact, it so happened that the business sponsor said, hey, we will be 2 of us who will be very closely associated with this. Can you set up a meeting place for us on a weekly basis at your school? And the students arranged for it. And so these 2 gentlemen used to come to the department meeting facility every week. And then they started alternating after a while, but that's a commitment. right? So with all that they define. So what this definition is, this is, I don't want to name the company, but if once I describe it, you know who it is. But it's, so the problem is basically to minimize the or predict the occurrence of blue screen of death. We all have computers, and the companies have servers, large computers, right? All of them have common problem. That is, they suddenly go blank. It's called blue screen of death. So how do I predict that blue screen of death? I'm collecting all kinds of data, right? So if I have, my users have a certain software in their system, the software is constantly sending me data about that computer, temperatures and all kinds of things, application crashes, all those data. It's really a huge amount of data, right? So it's constantly coming in. I need to take all that, analyze it, and predict this. This is my business need, is to be able to predict. So my headache with the customer support is minimized, right? So the number of people calling in, the cost incurred, all of those kinds of things. And then the business question, this is all students came up with, the student groups. Can the application crash be a predictive indicator of blue screen of death? If so, what's the time scale? What's the lag between the application crash and the blue screen of death? And so this becomes again some type of a classification problem. So how should the predictive framework be implemented? So obviously this is a real world problem, so implementation is always in their mind right from the beginning. So they used a couple of different approaches: neural network model and logistic regression model. And they found that neural network is slightly better than the logistic regression with the various kinds of comparisons. So they were actually be able to predict the blue screen of death. Now, what is the impact? You remember, reduce the cost incurred by, incurred to the call center support. Now, what really happened was this project really shifted the paradigm. It is not, the customer support is not waiting for the call to come in with the irate customer yelling and screaming and saying, I have my server has just died. I lost everything, and things like that. Instead, you call with a very calm, quiet, nice voice, greet them and say, Mr. Customer, you may have a blue screen of death issue within the next X minutes, or if you have already had one, don't worry, relax. We have it all covered. We have auto saved everything. We have a snapshot of your server, so we can restore it, recover it in no time. Now, this is proactive customer support, right? So this is they measured all the outcomes, and it's a phenomenal program. The nice end to the story is, one is obviously this is a student project. Two, one of the three members of the team got hired by this company. And it so happened that this was an incubation type of idea project that they kind of dabbled with, and they saw the success. They built on it. And now they have, I think, if I remember, at least 6 of the graduates from the same program in that organization. And other organization, the same company, got to know this. They sniffed it out, and they have been hiring. So we are about double digits within the last three years or so. And the feedback I get, even today, I talk to some of those sponsors. They say, man, these guys are phenomenal. It's wonderful that they are able to understand the business, bring some really cutting edge in terms of analytics, and drive conversations with our executives and make them believe on analytics, bring that confidence in adopting these solutions and so on, right? So that's sort of like the end that we have to have in mind. And all of that is summarized in this one with even some potential courses and so on in each one of these. Foundation, application, specialization. What are some of the typical courses that we can incorporate and so on. And I can spend more time, and I can certainly share this offline with all of you on this curriculum and how we can go about doing these kinds of things. It is doable, it is working, and it's a working model, and it's certainly something that every university thinking of analytics programs should adopt. Um, I'll end with some of the trends that's going on in the universities in the US. Now, when this challenge really came about, maybe about 5 years ago, I would say maybe 6, 8 years ago, to be very specific, big data, analytics, and so on begin to catch fire, and people are, looking at this with some success that e-commerce type companies had in the Silicon Valley. So industry was seeing that this is becoming a differentiator. Companies are distancing themselves by using data, by applying analytics, and so on. So the need for people trained in these kind of things started to go up. And McKinsey, the consulting company, did a seminal work, and I think that's one of the often quoted work where they really projected the need for data scientists and so on. The gentleman, Tom Davenport, that Doug Gray talked about yesterday, is a big advocate from an academic standpoint. I think he went to a lot of different companies, spoke about the promise of analytics, wrote a couple of books, Competing on Analytics. If you want to get some introduction to the industry side of analytics, you may want to pick it up, Competing on Analytics. So there were some influencers that also made it possible. So the business schools are the first responders. They jumped in, as Professor Bunk as jumping in here to bring all of us together, right? And the outcome was really, 1-year master's program, which was sort of unheard of prior. We all have been familiar with MBA, 2-year MBA degrees. Now, the industry wanted a little bit more quantitative type people who can understand analytics, at the same time talk the business language. So the answer was not MBA. The answer was, how can I shave things that I can shave from an MBA program and yet not lose that business focus, but infuse this analytics, quantitative analytics into this curriculum. And the product that came out was this 1-year master. Some of them are 10 months, some of them are 12 months, but it's generally called 1-year master's program. Business analytics, data science, names, change, but North Carolina State, actually they worked with a partner called SAS. I'm sure many of you know SAS. They are right next to each other. So it turned out, that became a partnership. And I would also warn that, those kinds of singularly focused partnerships also are sometimes limiting, sometimes can be limiting. You are obliged to a partner because of funding and so on, and you are forced to teach only a certain way, and you are sort of not open up to these open source and things like that. So that's a word of caution. But NC State did that successfully, and then followed by many others, including the program I was associated with, UT Austin Macomb School of Business, MSBA. When I left, I think we were ranked number 2 in the world last year, and I think it may still be holding within the top 5 still. And then Duke, Columbia, similar institutes all have this 1-year program. So the point here is the adoption was very quick. Everyone saw the need and they felt compelled to respond to the industry needs, and they went doing this. And then it got scaled up, expanded to address working professionals specifically. Northwestern University, for example, it's a 100% working professional program. And Harvard last year came up with their own version, a 9-month version of the business analytics. Um, and they call it MBA. They are not worried about calling the program MBA, even though they already have an MBA, a Master of Business Analytics. But it's a 9-month program, fairly interesting in terms of their delivery models, with the blended models and so on. Blended delivery, online, in-person combinations, which I think it's a must, particularly in the world that we live in today. It is forced on all of us, right? So worthwhile to look at those kinds of things, which I think in the fast track that I mentioned, all of that is sort of thought through and embedded in my idea. And then there are 100% online programs as well. Southern Methodist, where Doug Gray teaches as an adjunct, as a Master of Science in Data Science, fully online, with some local faculty in the classroom, kind of a blend, but primarily online program. So now these are all responded with the general demand for analytics professionals. And then the trend kind of took off from there. There were schools that said, hey, I want to get a little bit more specific. So they started offering programs like supply chain analytics, Rutgers University, for example. Some of them started embedding finance, NYU as a finance analytics specifically, a full program. And then others started following this trend. Washington University, for example, in St. Louis, they have 1-year program in all the specialty areas, right? So just not business analytics, 1-year program in supply chain analytics, financial analytics, marketing analytics, and so on. Each one a separate full programs, 1-year program, right? So I think that's where we are today in terms of trends. And so hopefully I given you some ideas to think about, particularly along the lines of, if I'm thinking of business analytics from a university, what are some of the key elements? Think fast track, particularly the RAC, the real world analytics challenge. Start there. If you're thinking of a program, how do I enable that? The F, A, and F, the foundation, application, specialization, and the technology, I think we can put that together fairly quickly. But the real world analytics challenge, with the commitment from the industry and so forth, is something that you may want to start thinking, and that will become a differentiator, right? So with that, Priya, I think that's hopefully all I have. I'm sorry I went over a few more minutes, but I got carried away by the
We
topic.
all love to
And
continue, sir.
No, I think you covered all aspects, Ramesh. I think you didn't leave anything, especially if I talk about the Indian context. Now that you have given us the US context, and like exactly you mentioned, the area that is we need to strengthen on is the application part, right? So somewhere it has taken a backseat. Okay? Barring some elite institutions like IIMs, right? Every other institution like ours have to work on strengthening this application part, right? Especially working with the industry on the real world projects. And that's where your story, that is fast track, very well fits in, right? And kinds of summarizes the way forward. Otherwise, I may know all the technologies beneath the sun, and I have all the, what you call, the functional domain knowledge also, right? But somewhere, if I am unable to apply it, I have not applied it, and that confidence is missing in me, right? Then my value as a professional certainly goes down, right? So that is where I think, like you very clearly mentioned, application is the key in the fast track. So we need to work on that. And of course, the that is where the real world projects make a lot of value. Thank you so
Right.
much. Thank you so much. It was
Thank you.
very, very enriching. Very, very enriching. Thank you
Well,
so
I'm
much.
glad. I'm glad. So please, don't hesitate to ask me questions. You have my email. You can
Right.
contact me anytime. We are here to help. I'm passionate about this education. Hopefully, you picked it up from my presentation.
Yes.
I really, um, particularly the aspect of industry and the universities working together
Together.
with a common goal. And the common goal here is to address the need. I know, based on discussions with you all, that there's a crying need in India too, right, for analytics
True.
professionals.
True. True.
And I
True.
think collectively we have. I'm so heartened to see the participation here with so many people joining in. That shows that there is that that they
Hunger.
understand the need for change, that hunger is there, and I think we need to work together to solve this problem.
Yeah.
So thank
I
you.
Ramesh, one question. All right. I think on behalf of the attendees, I would like to ask this question. Uh, what are the expectations by the MBAs who are specializing in analytics? Are they expected to be the top class programmers? Is that the expectation? Or their expectation from the industry is this guy should understand the business problem and should be able to communicate in the technical language to the technical people, technical team that is involved. I think somewhere the role of that bridge, connecting the business executives, business needs to the technical team, I think.
Right. I think
You can
I would summarize that into my favorite term, quantitative storyteller.
yeah,
Right. So and what that's the expectation, and what I mean by that is, with the background, the general business background that you gain from an MBA education, you know about all the business domain. Absolutely. That is going to be part of who you are. Don't lose that. You have to have that. And with the MBA analytics, what you're really trying to do is to embellish that even more. And by you're embellishing it by understanding how analytics can be applied, and how you can confidently drive analytics discussions, and provide that basis for driving business value using analytics, which comes from ability to communicate the results you get from the models, not the models themselves.
yeah,
You have to know what the model is. You may be asked to do modeling. I mean, if you know, in other words, if you're proficient with all of these, the key aspect of all of that would be to communicate the results and connect that to the business need, and and articulate how it is going to drive business value, and confidently uh, seek action from your customer or your manager or your executive, right? With the
yeah,
confidence. For example, I tell my students, um, when they do these kinds of projects, even the one I showed here, if you really think about it, when a company sponsors a project and says, here your access to the data, go at it, right? Here is all the data we collect on this particular topic. This is where you need to go look. Here's the key. You have the freedom. Uh, so you go collect all the data as a analytics person trying to get something out of this project because your professor is beating up on you. You have timelines. You got to get done. So you are really deep down into this data. You are you're querying, you're cleaning, you're massaging, you're doing all kinds of things with the data to understand and figure out what are the variables that I need to really narrow down here so I can relate this to the business need and the business question. So when you're doing that, you learn so much from the data. You learn so much. What is good, what is not good, what's going to be applicable, what's not. This is what is going to be my influential variable or variables. How do I reduce this down to a manageable set? You kind of know all about it. And you're throwing out some variables and you have a reason for it. You're not simply throwing out, but you have a reason. Every time you reason it out, you are basically learning about the business, right? This is the reason I'm throwing it out, because it doesn't really influence the business much. And you have a fact. So in that understanding, what I tell them is at the end of all of this, when you make the presentation to your sponsors, to your executives and so on, that confidence needs to come in.
Yeah.
That confidence cannot come from anybody else. You 3 or 4 people, you guys have looked at it, or girls, you have looked at this more than anybody else in that company or the entire globe, because nobody else outside the company even cares about the data, right? So you know more about the data than anyone in that organization. So bring that in your presentation, bring that confidence in your presentation. If you can do that, you have done it.
Yeah.
You have learned
I,
it.
I think again the good part is the technologies have become more and more simplified and user friendly, right? Because that's a very interesting development. Otherwise we people MBAs think it's all a technology game, so it is it's not for me, right? But when you start using, for example, simple tool like R, you will realize that there are already packages developed by
Right.
the developers, 70,000 plus packages for various analysis. So you need to pick the right package and just create a model and run it, and like you said, show the results in a very very impressive manner, have that quantitative storytelling. It's
Right.
very very interesting, right? So
Right.
I think, am I sounding right, or
I think you are on the right track. Absolutely. I think technology is more and more, it's not about sitting down and writing hundreds of lines of
coding
code.
and programs, and yeah.
It may still require some scripting, but that's very minimal because there are
Yeah.
packages. All you're
Yeah.
doing is bringing the packages and enabling them and so on. It's and we have a duty when we teach those foundation courses. We have an opportunity to tailor it in that way,
Sure.
not as a exercise. Just go write script, code after code after code.
Yeah.
You just say, here's the problem. I want you to address this. And this is how you're going to bring the data and put it in the model, right?
Yep.
That process is what we need to emphasize on.
Very true. Very true.
So,
Yep. I think over to you, Priya.
Mm.
Otherwise,
Th-
discussion will go on till 7:30. Somewhere we have to call right. So
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Ramesh, and thank you so much, Dr.
yes.
Bank, for taking us through these real-time case studies and making our understanding of analytics more deeper.
Yeah.
So moving towards the next session, just one second. So now we'll move towards the second session for the day, which is on business analytics and opportunity for academia, which will be taken over by Mr. C.S. Venkatesh. So a brief intro about Mr. Venkatesh. Mr. Venkatesh is the founder and CEO of Metcog Solutions Private Limited, Bangalore. Before starting this Metcog, Mr. Venkatesh set up and managed Fugu Creative, a graphic design company, and Cirrus Consulting Private Limited. Prior to his serial entrepreneur journey, he was a director, sales consulting for I2 technologies in India and worked with key Indian customers including Maruti Udyog, Indian Oil Corporation, and Agrotech Foods. He also held positions in Ban Asia Pacific, Singapore Technologies, ITC Infotech, and many more. He has had roles in managing development, consulting, and pre-sales with a focus on in the areas of manufacturing, supply chain management for automotive and electronics industry. So over to you, Mr. Venkatesh.
I think you have to unmute. Unmute. Yeah.
Thank you, Priya. Good evening to everybody. So I'm just going to give me a minute to
Sure.
start my session.
Mhm.
Can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So let's look a little bit at why are all of us here for, right? We've talked a little bit, quite significantly, about the opportunities in analytics. And obviously there is going to be, there are tremendous opportunities because we have seen that not only in the US and India as well, there are a lot of opportunities for people who are going to be skilled in analytics, right? So what are the lessons for it that we see that for people who are faculty, who are heads of programs, what can you get out of this, right? Because end of the day, we see that this is an opportunity, a win-win opportunity for everybody. So let me spend a few minutes on talking through some of these aspects. Now, what I'm showing you on the screen, there was a survey done before COVID by Kaplan University and Quest. There are few things they asked the parents, and this is a global survey, but primarily majority of the respondents were from the US. What were the concerns of students and what are the concerns of the parents of the students, because many of the students are younger. So in their mind, one of the biggest issues was, what is the value of education? What is it going to give me? And what is the implication of the high debt that students are taking, especially for business programs, right? So that's one concern that parents had. How do I balance the amount of money that I'm spending to gain an education, and how is it going to pay off for me? The other thing which is very interesting is most parents felt that work experience is extremely important, right? Although they were talking about an academic program, they're still saying that we need our children to work. The third important point is that in addition to getting marketable skills, the parents also wanted the students to get social skills and critical thinking. As Dr. Ramesh has laid out in his sessions, you will see that if you look at his favorite phrase, quantitative communication, there is a quantitative on one side and there's a communication on the other side, right? So you can see that this is getting reflected not only in the people who think about these things, but also in the thoughts of parents who are actually very important in deciding where the students go to study. Now, we are all today in a very disruptive world, and the term is used in many contexts. But one negative context that we are looking at is this pandemic has forced us to reevaluating several things. We are not looking at things the same way. We are not looking at how we go to a coffee shop. We're not seeing how we're going into a classroom and having a group discussion. All these we are going to be forced to re-explore and reimagine. The second aspect, there is economic uncertainty everywhere. Now, there is pressure on jobs, there is pressure on people's incomes, there is a whole lot of chaos happening. Now that will cause people to fundamentally look at, re-explore cost and value. So the cost benefit analysis that we would do has to get reevaluated because of this disruptive action, right? So that's the background against which we start. So the one big movement which has happened, and this began even before we were ready for, I don't think we were ever ready, but even before COVID, is the movement towards online. Now we, especially all of you who are practitioners in the academic world, you have to really look at this, because I think many of you have already in the last few months taken online sessions, right? So online is no longer theoretical. Online is no longer 5 years away, 10 years away. It's already here. So we need to understand what's happening out there in the world and how do we use that to our advantage and opportunity. So there are, most of you would know this information, but I would just like to highlight a couple of points. MOOCs, there are more than 100 million learners, and there are more than 10,000 courses, according to a report from ICF Monitor. Now, interestingly, our own MOOC offering from India, Swayam, has already garnered 10 million learners, and there are 1,000 courses on it. This is no small achievement, right? So it's not something which is happening in the US, which is happening in Europe. It's happening here.
And is available in local languages.
Absolutely. That's a brilliant.
That's a new development.
Right.
Including technical courses are now available in the local regional languages.
Right. I think these are extremely important for us, because we will, all of you who have taught in classes know that you have to adapt your style of speaking, your method of communication, and sometimes even your language to your learners, right? So this is actually being driven by the need of the market. Then we also have the EdTech portals. And many of these portals are offering programs in management and technology, short-term certificate courses, jointly offering degrees. So there are many activities which are happening in these portals, right? We cannot ignore and wish them away. They're already here. Some portion of students will look at them. A good point, even though we have seen in the last few weeks, there's been a lot of, criticism about how online learning is impacting those who do not have the right infrastructure. The good news is broadband is growing significantly in India. And this is a report from TRAI in October of 2019. So there are already 65 crore subscribers of broadband in India, right? So that's a good thing. But the other piece that we need to watch out is education is becoming international, right? It's no, therefore, we have to be aware of it, and we have to make sure that we can be on the right track of all of these movements, right? Now, so this yesterday and today, one of the big focus areas was on what does industry think about all of this? Because industry is our customer. They are the ones who are going to hire our students or recruit our students for jobs. So their viewpoint is extremely important. We still, the academic institutions still have their way of doing things, but it is important to listen to the voice of our customer. So a few aspects again from industry. Employability. Employability has increased. It's 46% for general courses, but among MBA students it's 54%. So it's something good. We are better off, MBA schools are better off than other institutions, but it is not enough. If it's 54% employability, that means there's 46% lack of employability, right? Who are the big hirers? Who are the big recruiters? The BFSI industry, the BPO and KPO industry, and the internet business and the ITES, right? So these are the industries which are going to continue to recruit a lot of people. One important concern of industry is relevance of curriculum. What are you teaching me? Is that relevant to my today's business? And the importance of analytics in this cannot be stressed enough. The need for retraining. If I, as a company, I'm hiring a graduate and then I'm putting them through another 3 months of training, that's not good. I don't want to do that. My core business is producing cars or producing soap or building engines for aerospace. I should not be again doing the activity that we want the institutions to do. So that's not something that I'm very going to be pleased about. Mismatch of jobs and skills. Are we training people for jobs which are no longer around? If we are training lots of engineers and the demand is for nurses, that's a mismatch. So that gap between jobs and skills is a very critical one. The other aspect is, and this is really to do with the student community, but also, it's an impact on society. We have a lack of interest, especially many students, in so-called difficult careers. We want the easy way out, right? People would prefer to join a BPO or a KPO than manufacturing. Manufacturing jobs are hard. But we have realized, especially in this area of COVID, when the government is talking about make in India, go vocal for local, it's manufacturing which is extremely critical. So if our students don't want to go and work in manufacturing companies, there is a problem, right? So part of the job as faculty and academic professionals, we have to send the right message to our students, right? That you cannot shy away from something because it is difficult, because some of the most rewarding careers are actually in these kind of difficult areas, right? Now, I want to draw your attention to the box, the blue box on half of my screen. The skills which employers seem to emphasize are domain knowledge, adaptability to the environment, learning agility, and positive attitude, right? This really sums it up very well. So there's an excellent report which is called the India Skills Report 2020, and I've taken some of my input from that. So keep in mind, we talked earlier about domain knowledge. Professor Bang also stressed about it. Adaptability to the environment is being forced upon us. Today, if we don't adapt, we are in a problem, right? So we need to have that passed on to our students as well. Learning agility. You cannot take 5 years to learn something anymore. You got to keep learning. And positive attitude. Let me give you an example of what I have done. I'm probably older than most of you in the audience, in the webinar. I'm 60 years old. In the last 3 years, I've done 5 comprehensive MOOC programs and got certified in all of them. Each one was a 60-hour program. Now, if I can do that, there is no justification for anybody to say, I'm too old to learn, right? So that's something which we should keep in mind. As faculty members, you guys should keep in mind, and you should pass this on to your students, right? Now, this chart is not updated as of May, so definitely there is going to be an impact. But I believe this is a short-term impact. It's not a long-term impact. What this report brought out is that the majority of the employers, 56%, had a positive intent to hire. It was slightly lower than the previous year because of the economic downturn, but definitely many people looking to hire. What's even more interesting and heartening is that the higher number of smaller organizations, we call MSMEs, showed a positive intent to hire. Right? Now, I've worked a lot with MSME organizations, especially in the automotive sector, and I know that there are jobs available, but for the right people. And all the jobs are not about, machine operators. There are several areas where smaller companies could do with the things that we produce. So that's something which is there. There is going to be some impact on this because of the current situation, but we believe when growth picks up again, we will see a return to this kind of optimism. So what are the emerging skills and areas? There are 5 of them, but what heads the list? Data science and analytics. I apologize for the spelling mistake. It's not analysis, but analytics. So that's the number 1 emerging job area as employers are concerned. Another statistic I picked, I just this morning checked out, did a search in Naukri. There are 16,000 open faculty positions in India as on date, right? So that tells you the opportunity related to analytics. So there are, again, the study has got some extremely important recommendations, and this only re-emphasizes what you've been hearing about in the last 2 days, right? It's a very good summary for that. The first important aspect is the learner-driven curriculum, right? And the curriculum has to fit what is the upcoming jobs. So if industry is projecting that we're going to need more people in analytics, we better align our curriculums to that, right? That will help us take advantage of the situation and help our students get more jobs. Improve facilities and infrastructure. The other important point is building a curriculum which drives what they call ASK, attitude, skills, and knowledge, so that students are ready for this lesson when they take up their career. It is extremely important because the last few years they spend in the institution can help them develop a positive attitude or a negative attitude towards a career. And if they don't start their jobs well, many of them get impacted. So it is your job as academics and professionals there and faculty members, when you're closely in touch with your students, to impart these attitudes. It's about, the knowledge, attitude, and skills. And like I pointed out earlier, you have to be ready as a student stepping out into the world to learn, unlearn, and relearn, right? So as to paraphrase, we used to have something called change is constant. We've all heard that. Learning should be a constant for you, right? So if somebody thinks that when they finish their college degree and they've learned everything, they will get a big disillusionment when they get into the working place. So learn, unlearn, and relearn is going to be critical. The other aspect, which has again been spelled out in quite detail, practical oriented knowledge. So I was thinking about what would be good projects. And, Dr. Ramesh briefly mentioned something, but I am a supply chain person. So one of the things which has happened 4 years ago in our country is GST, right? There's a lot of media attention about GST, a lot of controversies, a lot of political debate. But keep that aside. The industry which benefited significantly from GST are those who spend a lot of money in logistics and those who are in the logistics industry themselves. If you ask anyone in that industry, they will tell you that the lead time to move some material from Delhi to Bengaluru or Chennai has dropped by something like 30, 40, in some cases 50%. Now, it's not that the distance between Delhi and Bengaluru has reduced dramatically. It's not that some great new roads have been built. Although roads have been built, these sector had good roads. But why has the lead time dropped? The lead time has dropped because of the reduction, the free movement across interstate. Now, what has that got to do with a project? Earlier, if I was selling biscuits and I was selling, my territory was Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala. And if I wanted to sell biscuits from there, I wanted to get it from my factory and then give it to all the shops. Guess what? I had to have a minimum of 4 warehouses, 1 in each state, because of the way the taxation system worked, because of the way invoicing worked and all that. If I didn't do that, my tax would become higher. So people were choosing warehouse locations based on tax and not based on logistical efficiency. Now, what happens is with GST, which has come in, I can keep my warehouse anywhere. So then comes the question, where should I keep my warehouse? And that is a basic problem and that's a business problem. Where do I keep my warehouse so that I can have a good level of customer service and I have a lower level of cost? That's the business need. So if I want to solve that as a student problem, then I would, or an analytics problem, I would look at what is the model I have to build, and that's a operations research and optimization problem, right? And then, of course, my optimization model may come up with the answer and say, build a warehouse in a jungle. But obviously we can't do that. So the practical input, and when I communicate with my stakeholders, we will find that there is something beyond the math where we have to take it and apply the practical considerations in order to solve the problem. Now, this is just one example. Because of the change world, the change supply chain opportunity in India, and the transformation which is taking place, I believe there is going to be a dramatic need for science and optimization and technology-based solutions, right? So that's how I would relate the inputs given by Dr. Ramesh and Doug and Professor Bang. The other thing which we do as academics is to, the last 2 points, career counseling, I'm sure all of you do it. But the last point, incidentally, we've all heard, engage with industry, right? That's our gap. Professor Bang has identified that as the weakness. So that's something all of you have to do. So what we believe, and we are very excited that we are part of this webinar, we think you should strengthen your core, the foundation, application, specialization, and let your students work with real world challenges. That's where the opportunity is. And in closing, I just want to mention that the way forward is what we had positioned this webinar as. So RVM and SetConnect, we are happy to offer you several things going forward, not only this kind of webinars, but also faculty development programs, short-term certification. Ramesh has already shared with you thoughts about the curriculum. We can talk more. We want to bring global faculty to you. And finally, we want to give the icing on the cake is the support for real world and real life analytics challenges, right? So with this, I end my presentation. Thank you for all of you to listen to this presentation patiently. And I must acknowledge the excellent support of all the RVIM team, headed by Professor Bang, who have made this event possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Venki. It was very inspiring and motivating too for all of us, right? Not just the attendees, but all of us who are in this education space. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Over to you,
Priya?
Priya.
Thank you so much, Venkatesh sir, for this insightful lesson. So now we'll move towards the third and last session for the day, which is on business analytics a way forward, and which will be overtaken by Dr. Pushottam Bank.
Yeah.
So I guess Dr. Pushottam Bank no needs any introduction. He is a great leader and wonderful entrepreneur, and I must say he's a wonderful director. So over to you, director sir, without any further delay.
Thank you so much for those generous words, Priya. Thank you so much. I tried to live up to that. All right. So without any delay, because I want to close it, maybe in another 5-10 minutes. So just trying to summarize and what is lined up for all of us in near future. So I'm going to touch upon that, and we'll try to close it with a very positive message, right?
Sure, sir.
So I'll just share my screen. Is it there now?
Yes,
On
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So I think again, as usual, I would like to start with a quote, simple quote. Very interesting quote, right? He's a Nobel laureate. He says, torture the data, right? I think Ramesh used the softer words. He said, massage the data, right? Manure the data, right? Play with the data. But he is using a very strong word, torture the data, and it will confess to anything. So that's the power of analytics, right? The treasure, the insight is hidden in the data. So we need to just churn it and try to extract some insight from it. It's like samudra manthan, for months together, suras and asuras, they tried to manthan the samudra, and so much of wealth came out of that manthan. And same thing holds good even with the data, right? So just a quick poll again. I want you people to contribute to the this body of knowledge through sharing your insights. So please take some time out and please answer these very simple questions. I already launched the poll, right? And please, very simple questions, because those insights are required in order to take it to the next level. I think I used the same poll. I'm extremely sorry for stopping you. It was a second poll. By mistake, I launched the first poll. Now I am going to launch the correct poll, that is the second poll. There you go. Sorry for that. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible, sir.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Priya. Thank you. Yeah. So we'll try to close it, right? By the time we reach to 200 number, and we'll share the results because it's going to be very, very uh, interesting to know these numbers so that we can plan something very, very significant and useful. I'm going to stop now because I reached 200, right? And I will share you the results. Okay. How interested are you in becoming an expert in BA? All right. 51% said they are highly interested and 42% are saying they are interested, right? Very interesting. So we have the right crowd today, right? And I'm really excited and happy to know those numbers. Which functional area of analytics are you interested in? Right, 41% marketing, 46% finance, 36% HR, 28% operation analytics, and 8% others, right? So equally, kind of, it is kind of distributed more or less equally. So that is the results, right? I will stop sharing the results, and that is where the word is heading. Okay, so I will close this, right? So with that, I just want to, summarize the way forward. We are all talking about industry 4.0, business 4.0, education 4.0, but already the world is one step ahead. The Japanese society is already thinking about and acting on society 5.0, right? We all know that it's an aging society, the needs are different, right? So they are already, planning the movement called society 5.0. Let's watch that small video, right? So I will just close this and close this. Okay, then exit full screen. This, there you go. Right. So there you go, right?
ここはちょっと未来の日本のとある町。時間ぴったり。IoT や AI 技術によって叶えられるソサエティ 5.0 の社会です。
おはよう。朝ごはん何にしようかな。
スムージーはいかがですか？
いいね。
そろそろお出かけの時間です。
よっ。コロッケパンとミックスサンドいつものお店でお願い。
注文しておきます。
昨日から血圧が高いみたいですが。
あら、そう。また行ってきます。いってらっしゃい。おはようございます。
おはよう。はい、これ。
ありがとう。
危ねえ、間に合った。
先輩。
ああ、お前も乗るとこ？
未来が楽しみでしょ。
なんか言った？
なんでもないです。
Okay. So I think, it kind of summarized where we are heading, right? So I should share this, minimize it. Just here. There, where is it? it. Yeah. And then go to share screen. Share. So there you go, right? Sorry for this technological glitch because I cannot open two applications at a time. They are conflicting. Okay, so one tries to dominate another. So Microsoft versus Zoom. So we have to live with it. So no problem, right? I think it gave a broad understanding about where the world is heading. Autonomous vehicles, drone-driven deliveries, and all the applications will run on IoT and artificial intelligence, deep learning, and cloud accounting, and whatnot, right? So it's going to be fully driven by technology. That is the way forward, right? And we can't debate on that, right? So that's a way forward, and we have to live with it. So applications of business analytics, I would like to spend little time here because that is what is lined up in the next program of ours, right? So each one of us, I think, as in the poll result, we saw it. Some people are, specialized in marketing, finance, operations, and HR, right? So marketing, I think so many applications. And Professor Ramesh spoke quite a bit about various range of applications that the business analytics can apply in marketing. For example, customer relationship management, customer experience management, how to acquire customers, managing marketing mix, social media marketing, sentiment analysis, knowing the sentiments, very, very important. Then and there, real-time analytics via social media, right? So that's a way forward. And also the market basket analysis, churn analysis, right? How many customers am I going to lose in next 1 month? Right? Very, very important. Can I do something, to retain those customers? So churn analysis, sentiment analysis, affinity analysis. I think Ramesh spoke quite a bit about it. Recommendation engines, right? For example, I do a small search on smartphones. Suddenly, I will see that my email inbox is flooded with the smartphone advertisements. My Facebook account is flooded with smartphone advertisements. Instagram is flooded with the smartphone advertisements. How? Why? I mean, how it is happening? Right? That is all again boils down to the business analytics. All recommendation engines run on business analytics. Similarly, in finance, client profitability analytics, 80-20 principle. Who are my top 20 clients, right? So that I can focus on them, because 80% of revenue is going to come from those 20% of clients. I can't afford losing those clients. Cash flow analytics, shareholder value analytics, online fraud detection. I think yesterday I spoke a little bit about that, and it is, a lot of developments are happening, which is again a real-time analytics then and there, before the fraud happens, not after the fraud, right? So that is where interesting developments and applications of business analytics are happening. And I think Venki spoke quite a bit about how business analytics can be applied in production and operations and supply chain management, right? So where am I going to locate my transshipment centers? Where am I going to locate my warehouses? And how am I going to connect with all my, my customers? So that's all, part of supply chain analytics. Vendor management, how am I going to manage my vendors? Production planning, quality aspects, all those are part of the operations. And then comes, of course, HR. We can't ignore it. Optimized hiring, talent acquisition, retention of the talent, work satisfaction, performance appraisal, you name it, right? Labor turnover, all those subtle elements, employee engagement, right? Work automation, all those things are part of HR analytics. So business analytics can be very well applied even in the HR domain. So that's a way forward. So, and these are all, it's not confined to only these 4 departments or functions, right? It's much beyond that, in almost all facets, all functions of the organization. So in view of that, we have lined up the next faculty development program, which will be focused on the application of analytics in the areas of management. So we have some excellent speakers identified and lined up. For example, Devesh Batla is going to talk about marketing analytics, Prashant Ahuja, who are kind of who's who, when it comes to their domain specific knowledge in business analytics. He's going to talk about HR analytics. Swapnil Soni is going to talk about operations analytics, real-time applications of operations analytics in real world businesses in India, right? So that is what we'll be talking about, discussing about, because otherwise it will remain as an illusion, right? So we are all talking about it, but where exactly it is being applied, right? So lots of used cases we'll be discussing in this faculty development program. And of course, the Mr. Jishnu Mukherjee is going to talk about the finance analytics. And on the first day, I'm going to expose you to the word of business intelligence, right? So what business intelligence is all about, what it takes, what all we can do, what is that means, business intelligence means to a layman, right? So all those things, the nuances of business intelligence, the architecture that is behind the business intelligence, I will be covering on that. So it will be going to be very exciting, right? So dates are 22nd to 26th. So please block your calendar, and of course it will be in the same time, I think. So timing we will come back to you, and the sequence also will come back to you. And please tune to our social media channels, Facebook, YouTube, and the Instagram, Facebook, and of course LinkedIn, right? So you will get all the information. And after this, we are also not stopping here. Like, we'll go back to the fast track model, very interesting model, right? Then the next program will be on the emerging technologies, right? So we'll be covering all the elements of fast track in the days to come. So please stay tuned. Lots of good things are going to come to you. So let's have a meaningful professional journey ahead, right? Wherein we will also win, you will also win. So I would like to end my talk with this small little sentence, right? We have been talking about data is new oil, right? Let's uh, agree to that, right? There is no challenge there. I asked you one question, right? How Google is minting money, how YouTube is minting money, how Facebook is minting money. Well, they are all using the data, right? We have been supplying the data, and they have been using the data, and through which they are generating huge revenue and the profits. So data is the new oil, right? Some small little cookie is following all of us and capturing all of the data, right? Where you are going, what you are doing, right? Which book you are reading, what is that you are searching on the internet, and suddenly you will be flooded with so many recommendations. It's all power of data, right? So with that, thank you so much. You were the lovely audience. It was very nice interacting with all of you. And thanks to all the resource people also. And of course, thanks to our webinar jockey, Priya Jain, and also, all the
Thank you,
faculty
sir.
who are involved in this, Dilip, Nagasubba Reddy, right? Gurudatta Shenoy, Santosh, and of course, the technical team, Manjunath, Mamta, so many people are involved in this. So thank you one and all, and over to you, Priya. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bang, for this, power-packed session. So, one very good news from our generous director. We'll be sharing assessment form very soon. So, with due respect and due permission from our Dr. Bang, he has told that top 10 people will be awarded with an appreciation certificate on the basis of your assessment form which we'll be filling. So thank you, Dr. Bang, for your this generosity. So
Because I was driven by Doug, you know. We all ask ourselves, what's in it for me?
yes,
Right?
yeah.
So there is always something in it for you. So please put your heart in while filling the feedback and assessment form, right? And top 10 will be rewarded. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So now over to Dr. Santosh and Professor Gurudat Shenoy for quick Q&A session.
Yeah.
Over to you, Dr. Santosh.
Thank you, Priya ma'am. I think it was a wonderful presentation. The beauty of the presentation was that since most of the questions have already been answered by a panelist, I think I have very little questions to ask now. I think you guys have done my job very easy. So this question to Mr. Venkatesh, and the question is, what is the scope of prescriptive analytics in MSME?
So you can please ask once again. I think he got his headset
Yeah.
off. So yeah.
So the question is, what is the scope of prescriptive analytics in MSME, medium and small scale industries? Mr. Venkatesh, yeah.
Okay. So if you look at all of the analytics tool, there is no reason why they cannot be applied to MSME. However, there are some challenges right now. The biggest challenge is the absence of data. Many MSME companies do not have good, they don't have ERP systems, or they have some, a lot of work is done on Excel spreadsheets. So it's very tough from a data collection perspective for them. The business problem is still there, but only those companies which have got data can use the power of analytics. But we do believe that as companies recognize this, then they start building and capturing the data. That's something is going to be important. But one simple application which MSMEs can use today, especially those who are in manufacturing, is something like preventive maintenance, prediction of maintenance, right? When a machine requires maintenance. Now that's going to be very important for them, because the MSMEs, the equipment is the heart and soul of the activity. So if the equipment goes down, they are in trouble, because they don't have, unlike the large companies, they don't have spare equipment. So for MSMEs, I think there is definitely things like predicting when the breakdown is going to happen, or preventing the breakdown, is going to be a big application. Now there are already some tools which are available. I think there are people who are using AI for that, using different techniques for that. But one good startup idea, if all of you have students who want to do a startup, they can do a cloud-based solution for predictive maintenance and give it to MSMEs. So I do believe that MSMEs can take advantage of predictive analytics very well.
For example, right, I would like to just add a small sentence here. If I am an MSME and I am producing 4 different products, right? So how much I should produce, when I should produce, right? That scheduling part is again a very interesting example of the prescriptive analytics, right?
Yes.
For example, linear programming, simple solutions as simple as linear programming will help us in prescribing course of action. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Wonderful. So this question to Dr. Ramesh. Uh, anyway, we are in the global pandemic situation of COVID-19, and we have attendees even watching this entire webinar through our Facebook Live as well. So we have one question from our Facebook Live attendee,
Very
Professor
nice.
Bhagia, and she has
Okay.
posed this question to us. So question is, uh, can we have any business analytics model that can be deployed in these difficult situations? Do you prescribe or suggest any specific business analytic model that can help government or other institutions to solve the problems that is arising because of COVID-19? Can we have any such business analytical tools that we can think of in these difficult times?
To do what? I mean, there are so many problems that we have going through right now, right? I mean, if you take logistics, for example,
Yeah.
that Venkatesh talked about, what's a better time to apply logistics, optimization into logistics of transporting people to places with the limited capacity that we have? That can be a very good opportunity if we put our minds to it, if we put our effort to it. We can come up with a optimal solution for moving people from place to place with a good logistic solution. You know, that's something that pops up to my mind, and I'm sure a lot of smart people looking at those kinds of things and trying to address those things. And that's why you see I'm sure on a daily or weekly basis, the number of transportation medium, you know, the trains and so forth becoming available changes. And that's all probably because the ground conditions. So prescriptive analytics is all about understanding the constraints, understanding the resources that you have, and how do you optimize on the resources given all these constraints, right? So that is one area I can think of, and there are plenty others, I'm sure.
Yeah.
We can do.
In almost all areas, I think if you, I think Ramesh will agree to it. Almost all areas, I think we can apply analytics. For example, speeding up the innovation cycle, right? For example, now all of us are, you know, all the companies are in entire, all the governments are also thinking about how fast, how quickly I can produce ventilators. Right?
Yeah.
So there also, you know, the analytics can play a big role. Not just the transportation of the people, but also the transportation of goods. Right? It can be PPE, it can be drugs, it can be whatnot. Right? So the huge scope, tremendous scope. One more question, interesting question I saw in the chat box, and it was addressed to Ramesh. And a very, very specific question. It was asking about the duration of the capstone project.
Yeah.
So if
Okay.
you can talk a little bit about that. And it's very interesting question. So yeah.
You mean the real world analytics challenge?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry for the capstone. Sorry for the capstone.
Um, I think generally speaking, what I've observed in many programs, it's a semester long, which means
Okay.
about 4 months. I can get even specific beyond that. In that 4 months, if I apply 4 students per group, each project then comes to about 500 man hours, right? If you want to spread that 500 man hours through half course in one semester, another half course in another semester, gives you
That's also.
longer, but the effort involved. So this is where I think the key is we have to think like if you are managing an organization or a team, right? In a company, the project, whether it's 2 months or 3 months or 4 months, it doesn't matter. It's how much time you're putting together as a team to get a deliverable out. And in this case, the deliverable is your solution and a presentation to the management. Now, a rough estimate says about 500 man hours. Then you can distribute it between 2 semesters. If you start early, may do all the data work in the first semester and do the modeling work in the second semester and make the presentation, if it is distributed well. That's one way to, and the way to implement that in a course curriculum is you don't have a 3 credit course in a semester, you have 1.5 and 1.5, right? That's one. And I've seen in a small number of cases, it has also been applied as a 6-month project. It's a major component. It's a 2 credit, 2 course credit, 3 credit courses that you gain 6 credit for the capstone or analytics project. And so you are really doubling the effort. If it's 500 hours, you're talking really spending 1,000 hours, but it also is a bigger component of the whole program, right? It's 20% of the program instead of 10% of the program.
And I think they complete all the foundation courses and technology related courses before they enter into that project.
Yes and no. Yes and no.
Okay.
It will be nice to have some of those in their arsenal, but to really start engaging with a sponsor, accessing the data systems, getting access to all the other business systems and so on, it oftentimes that's a challenging part, especially when you're building a new partner. They don't know much about what do they need to do. You have to educate them, and even the established companies that we have, sometimes it becomes a problem. And if you work with federal government, which I do with some of the federal agencies, it becomes even more of a problem, because the time taken for them to align all the rights to access to data and so on, it takes them longer. They have more paperwork, more process. And so those kind of process can be addressed even when you're doing the
Beginning.
foundation course.
Yeah. So you can take one last question, and I think with that, Santosh.
Yes, sir. I think one
that
last
is okay
question.
with you, so you take a
Yeah,
call.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. One last question anyway. I think again to Dr. Ramesh. This is about by Shrikant Reddy from Coimbatore. The question is, what are the popular model building techniques available in business analytics? If you can suggest any popular model building techniques.
Well, I think when you're saying model building techniques, you are referring to what I earlier mentioned about classification methods, clustering methods, affinity analysis type, market basket analysis methods. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about.
Yes, sir.
I mean, there is really no one. This is not about popularity. It's more about what is my business problem, and which one of these is going to meet the specific needs of how I solve the problem, right?
Okay.
That connection. So you can say, in general, I would say in supervised learning approaches, I would say the classification in general category is more prevalent than others.
Okay.
But within the classification, there are so many techniques.
Yes.
Sometimes you have a term called ensemble modeling. That is, it's the outcome that you're going to recommend is based on not just one model, but from multiple models. And there are ways to justify why you use that kind of an approach. And so it's just not one technique. But the categories, I would say, maybe classification is quite popular,
Yes,
or
sure.
quite well used. And in the optimization, obviously linear programming has been so widely used in so many different applications. Of course, it has its limitations, but those are some answers I think
Yes,
you
sir.
can take away.
And I think there are 70,000 plus packages already available in the library for various specific applications. So you need to really look into what exactly you want to develop a model for, right? So
that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So that's it from my side. So over to Priya, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Santosh, for answering the queries of our participants. So here we have come to an end for the session, but not an end for the learning. So I'll end this session with a beautiful quote that never stop learning because life never stop teaching. So stay tuned on all the social media links of RVIM for many more such learnings from our institute. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you so much. I think
Thank you.
you will be playing some music, Priya, if I'm right. Then
So, sir, there is little glitch in the network.
okay,
I
don't
think.
worry,
Yeah.
don't worry, don't
Okay.
worry.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you all. Thank you, Ramesh. Thank you,
Thank you.
Venkit.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Guru
Thank you.
Dutt. And thanks, RVIM team, the Jockey Priya, Dilip, Nagasubba Reddy, and Santosh, Manjunath, Mamta, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks
Thank
to
you.
you, sir.
May
You
I
are the
have
wonderful leader.
Yes,
may I
yes,
have
Yes,
a
yes,
yes,
sir.
wrap
yes,
up
yes,
comment?
Yes,
yes,
sir.
yes,
I did have a chance to talk to Doug Gray,
yes.
and he said he was very impressed with the team. Specifically mentioned all of you, Priya, Santosh, the way that you coordinated, the question and answer sessions, and the coordination of speaker to speaker transitions, and the interactions with the attendees. He was, he really had, it was way beyond his expectations. That's kind of what he said.
Yeah.
So I wanted to convey that back. And
Convey our
Nice, thank
thanks
you.
to Doug also, Ramesh.
sure, absolutely.
Very nice to have him and all of you. And I eagerly look forward for a long-term, fruitful, win-win association between RVIM and Set Connect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you,
so much. Thank you.
everyone in the
I
audience.
really
Thank
mean
you.
it. I really mean it. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for this
Thank you.
session.
Thank you. Thank you.